Right, then let's go live to the pub and grab something from the drinks trolley as it goes whizzing past. What are we helping ourselves to this time, Suze?
A nice glass of white wine today, I think. I had a very lovely South African Chardonnay at the weekend.
Right.
So why not share that?
Okay, very good. Matt will have a small glass to get him through to the end of the show.
Why not?
And then the bottle for the journey home, because even though that's not allowed on the tube. So today's confession comes from Tex. T-E-X. Thank you, Tex, for this. Dearest Father Simon, Sister Susie, Brother Matthew, Sister Holly, and the Disciples of Forgiveness. Many years ago, I played in a country and western band. This is not what I'm asking forgiveness for.
Well.
We toured the land, bringing our interpretation of famous songs about dogs, grandmas, prisons, pickup trucks, getting drunk, trains, relationships that have gone bad, and so on, to many country and western clubs. Again, this is not what I'm asking forgiveness for.
Okay.
Although the content of our set sounds depressing, these clubs were well attended, with many patrons dressing up. Usually as cowboys, Indians, Beverly Hillbillies. A lot of effort went into creating these costumes and they really looked authentic. You might have thought that you'd step back in time. Flags, bunting and banners decorated the many dance halls, mainly in village halls or working men's clubs, and stages were decorated to give that Wild West effect. Unfortunately, there were two things that totally destroyed the total ambience. The first one being when the cowboys and Indians started talking to each other with comments like, "All right, Fred, how's it going?"
Right.
In a strong Yorkshire.
Strong Yorkshire accent. Right. Well, here it comes. Yeah.
Or similar greetings in other strong English accents, depending on where we were in the country that you were playing. The second one was when they sat down to play bingo in the break. Pocahontas, the Lone Ranger, Big Chief Running Bear, and Jed Clampett with bingo dabbers totally destroyed the illusion. One particular tour took us to the northeast. Okay.
Yeah.
Of this vast land to ply our trade. One night we arrived at the venue where we were booked. This was a working man's club. We were greeted at the door by a rather obnoxious chap with one of those jackets with leather patches on the elbows, a flat cap, and the one thing that the locals coveted and aspired to acquire, a big enamel badge that said, "Committee." This bloke was clearly important. The first thing he said was, in a London accent...
No, he didn't.
He was.
Oh,
he was
come
there.
on.
No.
He said, "Are you the turn tonight?" Yes, we nodded. "You're up there," he continued, pointing to a double flight of metal stairs going up the outside of the building. He then went on to explain in an exaggerated authoritative tone how important the bingo was, and we all had to keep quiet when the bingo was on. We promised that we would be as quiet as mice when the bingo was on, so we started to unload our equipment and ascend the access to great heights. I have to explain to our younger listeners that in those days this equipment was rather heavy, and polycarbonate PA's speaker cabinets was some years away from being invented. So I get to the top of the outside stairs with a big heavy PA speaker and go through the door. There was then another flight of stairs to climb. I get to the top of these stairs with my knees buckling and burst through the stage door. It was pitch black and I stumbled through and I felt the PA speaker bumping into something. Well, it turned out it was the bingo machine. And one of those with a Hoover motor running in reverse.
Oh, yeah.
And ping pong balls with numbers written on them. Luckily, it was pitch black, as I just stated, and nobody saw it happen. I put the speaker down and pushed the machine back to where it was, roughly. We finished bringing up the equipment. We set up and we did a sound check. We sounded great, due to the echo in the room, which made the pedal steel guitar stand out. In those days, according to the purists, if you didn't have a pedal steel guitar player in the band, you were not a proper country and western band. Didn't matter if you're any good or not, just as long as he turned up. And our guy sounded like the late, great Buddy Emmons. So obviously that's something to bear in mind.
Okay.
One of the great pedal steel guitarists.
Of course.
Yeah.
Buddy.
Anyway, we had a dressing room where we went to get changed and a tray of drinks was put out for us. Whilst we were waiting to go on, the speaker in the room came to life with his voice saying in a broad northeasterly accent,
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
yay.
Yeah.
"All right in the bar." Another voice replied,
Northeast London.
"All right in the bar." Then the first voice said, "All right in the lounge." And a different voice said, "Aye, all right in the lounge."
Right.
The first voice then
Right.
said, "All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for your first full house of your bingo, so eyes down." He was a Geordie.
Yeah.
There was this rather weird rattling sound, like a wheezy cough, and all the women went, ooh, in a strong northeastern accent.
Oh, did they?
I don't know if that's possible.
I'd like to hear that.
One of my colleagues put his head out of the door to see what was happening, and apparently, where I'd knocked the bingo machine, I had bent a little clip on the top. All of the balls were shooting all over the stage, and the important chap with the big committee badge, who everyone aspires to be, was on his hands and knees, picking up the balls as they shot everywhere. There was no bingo at all that night, Father Simon, as every time they tried, balls fired everywhere, even on the committee. But on the plus side, there was a whole lot more country and western, more twang and no too fat ladies, more pedal steel guitar and less 86 between the sticks, 42 Winnie the Pooh, and culturally this is a good thing, Father Simon. But I do need to say to the disciples of forgiveness, sorry, didn't mean it, honest promise, and crossed my heart. I'll never do it again, although I can't, as all bingo machines have gone digital. Thanks so much in advance. Lots of love from Tex. Well, I guess what you think on this confession will depend on what you think about country music and what you think about bingo, and also my accent, obviously.
Yeah.
I was doing my best. So anyway, Sister Susie, what do you say to Tex?
Well, Tex, I quite like country and western music, as you know, and, you know, I love a pedal steel, so I kind of am on his side, but I feel like my mum was also a very big bingo fan, and if she'd gone and there wasn't be any bingo, then there would be trouble. So I feel like I have to honour her and say, I can't forgive you for breaking the bingo, or at least owning up to the fact that you were the one that caused the issue. So
he busted the bingo machine. Brother Matthew.
I'm going to forgive. I mean, obviously, not least for the accents. It was absolutely spot on. Could have been there, really, couldn't we?
Yes, I think so.
Transported me. But I'm going to forgive. My very first job was being a bingo caller. It takes me right back. And you've got to check your bingo machine, haven't you? That's the first thing you do before you start reading out the bingo numbers, is you check your machine. And he hadn't checked the machine.
Well, when they checked it, then that's when it...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yes.
And so that was the root of all their problems. So once again, I'm proven right, and for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Okay. Interesting logic there, I think, as we followed it all the way through.
All the way.
Forgiveness or no for text, please, 61054. The people's verdict is required. But just before the news, there was a confession from Tex, which involved a country and western band, a bingo machine, which went absolutely crazy. But it did mean that this top country and western club got even more country and western twang, which seems to me a good thing. But anyway, the people's verdict, here it comes.
Not forgiven, says Cheryl in Scunthorpe. I love my bingo on a Tuesday night, and I'd be absolutely fuming if it all went wrong.
Okay.
Jack in Wrexham says, forgiven as someone who has worked on and occasionally messed up digital bingo calling on a holiday park, I can only sympathise with someone who's done so with the traditional system. We all make mistakes, and ultimately, there's nothing wrong with a bit of country and western. And Stephen New Brighton says, why I pet?
Oh, very good.
As a person who's had to deal with committee members when giving talks to PTAs, and as a Geordie living in exile, I forgive.
So you didn't try either, did you?
I didn't know it came across. It was almost like we were on Teesside there.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm very unimpressed. Okay, your confession, please, so we can include it, and then if we do, you get a smart speaker. Simon at greatesthitsradio.co.uk is the show email, but if you have a confession, it is confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. But there we go. Let's grab something, I think, from the drinks trolley as it wanders past. What are you taking for us today, Sister Susie?
A very nice session IPA today, 3.8%. So, yeah, very good session beer. Very, very pale as well, but very tasty. It's called Every Time from Bristol Beer Factory. It's delicious.
Reassuringly light for this time of the afternoon. Very good. Okay, well, today's confession comes from Pam. Please change my name. I'm now magistrate. Okay, so today's confession comes from Paula. Father Simon, Father Simon and the Confessional Collective says, Paula. Let's settle on Paula. In a recent episode of your marvellous podcast and your show, obviously, after reading out a confession about drunken geese in Ukraine, you made a request for further stories from the communist years of the Soviet bloc. Well, I thought, I can oblige. Though you'll be disappointed to learn I was not a member of any Politburo or a spy in the KGB or a peasant in the collective farm. In 1983, whilst in the sixth form, I went on a school trip to Russia. How about that?
Yeah.
That's incredible. We had a great time observing communism firsthand, and we admired statues of Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, better known to the world as Lenin, attended the Bolshoi Ballet, took an overnight train from Moscow to Leningrad. This is some school trip. Yeah. Declined offers to sell our jeans to shifty-looking men on the street, and met Russian school children who asked us who we thought would win World War III. Good times, huh?
Oh, dear.
As a bunch of 17-year-old girls, we were delighted that an Irish boys' school was taking the same tour as us, and much flirty chat ensued as we wandered around Red Square, the Winter Palace and other Soviet high spots. On the last night of the trip, we were all staying in the same hotel. The teachers in charge of us, the formidable Mrs. Pike and Mrs. Wilson, slight Dad's Army reference there, I think.
Yeah.
Told us that we were allowed to spend the evening in the hotel bars, but we must be back in our rooms by 10 p.m, tucked up in bed with lights out. Well, my best friend Jill and I had earmarked a couple of nice Irish boys. Let's call them Fergal and Seamus.
Well, let's.
We wanted to get to know a little bit better. So we're on a mission, and all thoughts of curfew went out of our heads when we got together with Fergal and Seamus. Eventually, we decided we should perhaps return to our rooms at about midnight. I can still remember my horror when I stepped out of the lift and looked down the corridor to see Mrs. Pike and Mrs. Wilson standing outside our room, visibly quivering with rage. We shuffled towards them, and they let us have it with both barrels. As we were used to similar situations with our parents, we adopted the usual protocol of mumbling, sorry, very sorry. It was them, not us. As we skulked past them and went to bed. The following morning, we expected to receive a further dressing down from the teachers, and were very surprised at breakfast when they greeted us with smiles and pleasantries. It turned out that Mrs. Pike and Mrs. Wilson had carried out room checks at 10 p.m. the previous night, and everyone was tucked up safely apart from Jill and me. Unfortunately, we were the last room they checked. And when they went back to the other rooms to see if anyone had seen us, because we remember we were missing, all those rooms were now totally empty. The other girls had gone back out partying. They'd arrived in time for curfew, got under the covers, fully clothed, and then gone back out to continue their nefarious ways. They had apparently actually been talking to real communists, though only they claimed to discuss tractor prices and the inevitable decline of the corrupt capitalist system. And so, in the eyes of the teachers, although we disobeyed their instructions, we didn't use any subterfuge or deceit, and in comparison with the others, some of them even argued when they were eventually caught. Were they insane? We were the good students. We had not abandoned the high moral ground of Western liberalism. So, I seek forgiveness not from the other girls on the trip. It was unlucky for them that our room wasn't the first one checked, but there you go. They were being sneaky and dishonest, after all, with the Irish lads. But from Mrs. Pike and Mrs. Wilson, by not appreciating that they must have been having a difficult time anyway, trying to keep tabs on a bunch of wild 17-year-olds with the KGB at their doors, with the spying games and honey traps and dead drops and all that, and by massively adding to their stress by going missing for a couple of hours on the final night in communist Russia. Yours penitently, Pam/Paula. Please change my name. I'm now magistrate. Okay. So it's very important to keep anonymity.
Yeah.
Let's see what Sister Susie makes of Paula's confession. What do you say, Sister Susie? I'm sure you've done similar.
Yeah, well, we went on to Holland. We only got as far as Holland on a school trip.
Not quite as exotic.
Not quite as exotic, but yes. There are probably similar things going on, I would say. And I'm very clever of the other girls to think to be there for curfew and to go out afterwards. Like, that's genius. And they kind of foiled their plan, really. And if I was one of those girls, I'd probably be a bit upset with them. So maybe I'll stick with those and not forgive for the fact that they ruined the plan to go out and...
So you didn't have Fergal and Seamus, but you had a couple of Dutch boys, did you?
But maybe not me personally.
No.
But
wow. Okay, that went off.
Well, I think the class was a bit enamoured by some.
Johan.
Yeah.
someone or other. Matthew, what do you say to Paula, not Pam?
Yeah, let's bring this back. Mrs. Pike and Mrs. Wilson, they probably knew that the kids were going to be out, didn't they? They knew what was going to be happening. They, get this chance many times. They used to be out in Moscow with the Irish boys. So I'm going to forgive. They all owned the means of production, didn't they?
Is that right?
Those teenagers. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
I hope there wasn't any of that going on.
No, there was definitely not.
Okay. Well, it went in a strange and unpredictable direction. Who knew about that? Yeah. So the People's Verdict, please, do you forgive Paula or Pam? On the People's Verdict, please. Can you send us a text? 61054, forgiven or not. First word has to be Simon. However, just before the news, an interesting confession from Paula, who is now a magistrate. However, it was a story of a Russian school trip misdemeanor with Irish lads under the watchful eyes of the KGB and the teachers.
Oh, yeah.
But they got away with it. Anyway, the People's Verdict is in.
Not forgiven, says Tom in Buxton. As a teacher who goes on residential school trips, kids going missing after dark is an absolute nightmare. I feel sorry for them. But Sharon in Swansea says, forgiven. I love sneaking around on school trips. If you're not hanging out with the boys, what's the point in going? And Jules says, forgiven. I agree with Matt. Pub lady won't even forgive a little childhood indiscretion. That's Sue's. Pub lady. They probably stopped World War III with the Anglo-Russian couplings.
Is that right? No, well, it wasn't an Anglo-Russian coupling, was it? It was an Anglo-Irish coupling.
Oh, yes, it was. That's true, yes.
So that's not quite the global significance, maybe. Anyway, if you have a confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Anyway, what are we having off that trolley there?
Well, it's probably something a bit too healthy for Matt, but I've gone for a non-alcoholic today. Mother Root. It's a ginger, nice kind of aperitif.
Ooh,
you can have it on its own with ice, or I had it with soda, and it was very, very delicious.
Very good. Thank you for that healthy option. And if Matt doesn't have his, I will happily partake. Today's confession comes from Debbie, brackets, name not changed. So I took that to mean you can call me Debbie.
Okay.
Father Simon and the Forgiving Collective, I write to you from the deck of a cruise ship sailing from Hawaii to San Francisco after a lovely Christmas New Year cruise and whilst enjoying my strawberry daiquiri. Actually, I think there's probably been quite a lot of strawberry daiquiri because the lack of punctuation in this confession is startling. I started to remember a previous cruise many years ago, and now I have no choice but to confess. Let me set the scene. There were many activities on cruise ships, even if you decide not to get off at whichever port you find yourself in. Cruise directors, who it has to be said are a very jolly bunch, have spent months preparing for each and every cruise, putting quizzes, crew and passengers, and planning pool volleyball, and make this and make that and buy this and buy that. Every night is a different show, a different comedian, a magician or something else in the main theatre. Honestly, it's exhausting. The theatre is designed like an old 50s style club with spaces between rows and small tables for drinks so the waiting staff can run around serving drinks. The cruise sounds like Matt's perfect holiday.
Yes, no, I love it.
The cruise in question was going around various stops of the Mediterranean. This particular day was a sea day, so there was much eating, drinking and lounging by the pool. A bit boring, in other words. So when hubby and I heard there was to be an X Factor Opportunity Knocks passenger show in the theatre, we were hooked, brackets, desperate. It was a packed theatre, anticipation dripping from the walls. We were sat halfway back on the lower level mid-row. Don't like to get too close to the stage. You never know what's going to happen. The theatre filled, the tension was growing. 2 rows directly in front of us sat a family of Texans. You could tell from the boots and the hats that they were wearing, and they all knew it. Dad was especially vocal. Howdy, all. Howdy. Howdy.
Okay.
That man had an opinion on everything, and he was loud. Even his wife had clearly had enough of him. And we're going to call him JR for the purposes of this confession. Yeah. The show started and various artists took to the stage. This was their moment, their one chance to make it. Simon, you have to remember that even the professionals on this ship wouldn't do this kind of show. We'd had castanets, I mean, who brings those on holiday? A magician who was trying to pull a rabbit from a hat when rabbit wasn't even on the menu, so where was he going to find one of those? Along with singers, and again, who told them that they could sing? I think Debbie is a little bit...
Yeah.
sour at this point. All the time, JR was giving us a running commentary very loudly on every single contestant. Howdy, y'all. Now, collective, please do not judge me, but I had possibly more than one cocktail. I'd had more than one cocktail this particular day, and they had been serving it in the theatre as well. I have in my hand a cocktail glass with a little straw and tiny ice cubes in it. It's called a grasshopper. Maybe Susie understands that. Is that right? Would that be a grasshopper?
Yeah, grasshopper.
Okay. So now a choir takes to the stage, and they're from Wales. We were going to cheer the loudest for these guys being from nearby England. Well, that's Debbie Big from nearby England cheering on the Welsh. Well, they started to sing, and to be honest, they were lovely. Beautiful harmonies filled the theatre, and everyone was listening except JR, who was getting louder and louder. You call this a choir? We got better choirs back in little old Texas. And he then started singing, this is the Texas state anthem written by William J. Marsh from Liverpool.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Texas, our Texas, all hail the mighty state. Texas, our Texas, so wonderful, so great. He was singing. I don't have the tune, I'm afraid, but that you get the general gist. How annoying. Well, Simon, this is where things got tricky, to be honest. I thought my number was up. JR proceeded to sing and get very vocal about my fellow countrymen, and to this, I admit, I took umbrage. But what do I do, Simon? Well, I couldn't do this again if my life depended on it, but I was going to try this. I sucked up a little cocktail into my straw, and I was going to fire it on JR. Well, instead, I managed to secure an ice cube onto the end of the straw, and I then blew and proceeded to fire it at this noisy Texan. Simon, my aim was perfect. Like I said, I couldn't do it again for $1 million, but it hit him between his 10-gallon hat, which he was wearing indoors, and the collar of his shirt. A totally perfect shot. JR leapt into the air like he'd been hit by 50,000 volts. What in the hell's going on? Hot damn, y'all see that?
That's very good. No,
I cunningly swiveled, looking behind me to see where the culprit was. JR was still in full flow. The Welsh choir had stopped mid-verse, and the cruise director looked like he'd faint. One of these freaking turnips has just shot me. I got shot. But who did shoot JR? That's the question.
Yeah.
Hubby and I are still looking behind us for the felon, and as JR threatened to sue each and every one of us and the cruise company and it seemed most of Wales, the cruise director decided to abandon ship rather than face him. It's fair to say the show was over. No fat lady, not even from the buffet, no singing, no nothing. Now, it being just an ice cube, there was no evidence and no DNA, so I am in the clear. There are no winners in this sorry tale, Simon. Half the choir were in tears, and they thought they had it in the bag. Various magicians, singers and others trailed off the stage. I do not require forgiveness from JR, he jolly well deserved it, or from the cruise director, because he should be used to it. But Father Simon, I seek forgiveness for the Welsh choir, because this could have been their moment, their X Factor, their chance, but between me and a loud Texan, we will never know. Please have mercy on a poor cruiser. Well, I don't think that poor, really, because there you are on the deck of the ship going from Hawaii to San Francisco with your strawberry daiquiri. Anyway, Sister Susie, what do you say to young Debbie here?
Well, Debbie made me laugh. I do quite like a daiquiri myself. I'm not a massive fan of the grasshopper. The cream in, a bit more like a dessert. You could probably only have about one of them. But
so you judging her on her cocktail taste?
A little bit, yes, but I think I'd find that Texas man quite annoying as well. And what are the chances of that shot happening? I think she did very well after a couple of drinks and still managed to hit the target. So I'm feeling quite kind today, so I'm going to forgive her.
Okay, all right, that's a bit of a turn up. Brother Matthew.
So I'm going to forgive as well, because what's this Texan doing wearing a big hat indoors? No need for that. Also, I love the idea of being able to shooting him with an ice cube, and the ice cube melts away. No evidence. Take that, Agatha Christie.
Crime.
Absolutely spot on. And also, how's this choir all getting together? I mean, were it different people? Were they all coming together? They all happened to be in a choir?
Yes.
Or was the whole choir booked on the cruise?
Impromptu.
That makes no sense. So for that reason, because of all the mystery, I'm going to forgive.
Okay. All right, so the people's verdict, please, for Debbie, name not changed, her cruise confession. Does she get your forgiveness? 61054.
Very good.
Thank you. The people's verdict, here it comes.
Not forgiven, says Robert in Bournemouth. I feel sorry for the Welsh choir. I know the Texan was a nightmare, but ultimately she ruined the performance for everyone with her antics. Andy in Grantham, though, says forgiven. As Matt said, why on earth was the Texan wearing a hat indoors, particularly in a theatre? A hat like that can completely obscure everyone's view.
Yes.
Sounds like he deserved it. And Simon says, I'm going to forgive because I lived in Texas for 7 years and know what it can be like dealing with loud Texans.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you for the verdict and thank you for the confession. Send yours to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. They'll 5:46 Greatest Hits Radio. There'll be a new confessions podcast for you tomorrow. No confession on the show, but you do get the podcast.
Of course.
So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So what do we have here? Well, first of all, we need something just to get things going. What do we... there's a nice selection on the trolley today. What have you selected for us, Sue?
Well, it is Valentine's Day tomorrow, so I recommend picking up a bottle of either Chapel Down Sparkling Rosé or Nightimber Sparkling Rosé, both English sparkling wines made in the traditional champagne method. Delicious to enjoy on Valentine's Day and any other day. They're lovely. You should try them.
Very good. Nicely chilled. Thank you very much indeed. Comes in a presentation box.
Ooh.
Thank you. I think.
No.
Anyway, today's confession comes from Dr. Kiss Kiss.
Oh.
Thank you, Dr. Kiss Kiss. And today's confession has at least a 12 certificate.
At least? Oh,
At
even
least
better.
a 12
I like.
for language and references.
Oh, references.
Father Simon in the Family of Mercy says, Dr. Kiss Kiss, I have a confession which harks back to the turn of the millennium. I was living on Australia's Gold Coast, working as a radiographer, and was dating an English GP who was working out there as well. We shared a lovely apartment and were blissfully happy. The good doctor was studying for one of her postgraduate qualifications and was working very hard, as all doctors do. She had a pile of medical textbooks covering topics as diverse as dermatology, the endocrine system, hormones, as you know,
Of course.
and reproductive medicine. I had worked a long and tricky night shift at the local accident and emergency and got home in the morning to find that my girlfriend had already left for her work day at a very busy practice a few miles away. I was a bit bored and not really ready for sleep. I started to vegetate in front of Bert Newton's Good Morning Australia on Network 10, bit of an institution, you should know, when I noticed the reproductive medicine book on the couch next to me. I picked it up and idly thumbed through the weighty tome when it occurred to me that the illustrations contained therein could probably do with some annotations, which I thought would amuse the good doctor while she was revising.
Yes.
Armed with a biro, a ruler, a felt tip and a set of crayons and a protractor.
Protractor?
I jotted, you got to get the angles right.
Oh, of course. Yes,
Have you?
I jotted down a few helpful and witty notes on a couple of diagrams, closed the book and promptly forgot all about it. Fast forward 6 months. The doctor had passed her exams, the books had disappeared from the flat, and everything was wonderful. Until one day, I walked in to see the doctor looking a bit cross. Well, very cross, in fact. Furious, I'd have to say. She was holding the reproductive medicine book and looking quite threatening. Did you do... did you... Oh, just...
Is it no Aussie? No?
No,
Yeah,
she's an English
no.
GP.
Oh, she's English.
She's
Oh,
GP.
okay.
Did you do this? She asked. Why? What happened? It's just a harmless bit of schoolboy fun to make you laugh. Using a fake laugh,
Fake
like
laugh.
you hear in the ads. I spluttered. What happened was the doctor was explaining to a very religious newlywed couple about the birds and the bees and the like, and decided to show the couple some helpful example pictures from the textbook. Apparently this rather delicate and serious situation was not helped by the word boobies, with arrows pointing to the relevant diagrams on
Why?
several pages, and most certainly complicated by the happy faces that I'd drawn on the illustrations of spermatozoa.
Right. Yes.
I seek forgiveness, not from the couple who probably didn't notice anyway, but from the good doctor. We've been married for 24 years now, but she claims she has never been more embarrassed in her entire life. Sorry, Prof, says Dr. Kiss Kiss. Well, I mean, this is kind of the kind of smutty schoolgirl and schoolboy behaviour that you expect, but not from fully qualified medics. Anyway, I suspect Sister Susie's going to take a very, very harsh line on this one.
Well, yes, it's very funny. Ha, 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 Dr. Kiss Kiss. But essentially, you're a full-grown man. Behave like one. Very childish. Not going to forgive you.
Oh, really? Okay, that's it.
Wow.
There you go.
I mean-
Just finding boobies funny. Oh.
Well, I mean, if
Let's
that's
all
the
laugh.
bar, you know,
Okay.
I'm not going to clear that bar.
Brother Matthew.
Yes, finding it hilarious. I mean, let's be honest, those books, they're all covered in it, aren't they? I mean, I can't believe there are any of those books that aren't just graffitied all over them
Is that right?
with various little happy faces and little slogans all over them. And I'm sure the couple saw the funny side. I think they love that kind of thing, and it brushed over what might have been a very difficult conversation.
think?
And I think it brought a bit of light into the whole thing, and everyone came out of it better. And isn't that what life's all about? So for those reasons,
Yes.
It
I'm
is.
going to forgive.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what those reasons
Did you
are.
not get them? Well, it was pretty clear to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
so as
Yeah.
the people's verdict, please, do you forgive Dr. Kiss Kiss for his smutty jokes and graffiti-written book on reproductive medicine, which embarrassed the good professor her indoors? Okay, what do you say? People's verdict, please, yes or no? 61054. First word is Simon. Plus, we had a confession, and it was all about Dr. Kiss Kiss, the professor, and the fact that he had altered and then added some notations to a book on reproductive medicine, much to everyone's embarrassment. And here comes the people's verdict.
So Amanda in Bournemouth says, forgiven, everyone needs some childish humour in their lives now and
Really?
again. Lots
Yes.
of chuckles from a car full of fully grown adults. Jenny, a retired nurse of 40 years, says, forgiven, made me laugh out loud. Many folk would be horrified to know that medics and nurses are the most childish on the planet when it comes to bodily functions. But Sam, the science teacher, says not forgiven. As a secondary school teacher that teaches the birds and the bees to a bunch of year 8 boys, I can tell you it's an absolute nightmare. The textbooks are always getting covered in comments and drawings, and they're expensive to replace.
I bet they are. Okay, thank you for the verdicts and thank you for the confessions. You can send yours too. Confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. There is a new podcast which lands in your inbox tomorrow.